We're going to be addressing today the sugya of Arisus and Kablanis on Shabbos, Yantiv, Chol Hamoed. And the complexity of this sugya, besides what I'm sure you've already experienced, is how to take the cases that the Gemara talks about and that the Poskim talk about and use those cases to contrast and apply them to the kind of commercial market we have today. In those days, the nursing home moguls were the people that bought off the tax collection rights from the king. The real estate people were people who owned multiple bathhouses, and so on and so forth. There are different kinds of businesses, different kinds of industries which required having non-Jews work, which weren't a choice. Those industries had to work on Shabbos. And once again, the kind of heterim, the kind of issues that are brought up there, we have to figure out how we can transpose them into the reality that we have today. What's important to realize is that everybody, just about everybody, employs non-Jews on Shabbos. You might not realize it, but obviously, if you employ a gardener and you forget to change his schedule and he shows up on Yantiv, so you have a non-Jew that's doing work for you on Shabbos, he's a kablan, but he's doing work on your front lawn, do you have to go out and be Michoel to tell him go home? You're not going to get paid. You have any kind of employee or any kind of sub-business that does work for you. You have call centers, you have marketing people working for you, even something like these online work job sites where like Fiverr.com, if you're familiar with that, you pay someone $5, $10 to do various different little jobs for you. So you have someone in India or Pakistan doing some kind of computer work for you. That's a guy doing work for you. And if you do it the wrong way, and they're working for you on Yantiv or Shabbos in a way that's usher, that's a problem. This guy you never met, you never saw, you got him online. That's a guy doing work for you on Shabbos. So just about everybody has some kind of connection to this sugya. And also, of course, it's important to realize that these sugyas all apply to Chol Hamoed. One of the primary maramukaimis, the Kabbalah Kabbalah Teichet Chum, is Chol Hamoed. And Chol Hamoed, Baruch Hashem, lately has become more popular. It was out of style for a while. Baruch Hashem, people are much more aware of the issues of working on Chol Hamoed, doing malacha on Chol Hamoed. And whatever you can't do, a guy can't do either. So that's a very important application as well. And it's important to understand the halachas and to understand the different applications so that you can understand what your business requires, what it entails, how it touches Shabbos, how it touches Yantiv. And it also helps to understand other people's businesses as well. Not saying you have to start a crusade after this, but if you know people that have businesses that run on Shabbos or Yantiv, you're only doing a chesed to bring to their attention to make sure that they have a mechira, the mechira is done correctly, it's been updated, it's not like something that was boilerplated 20 years ago, and they have new partners and new employees that weren't included. These things have to be kept up to date. And it's difficult. It's difficult to work out these sugyas. It requires a very good understanding of the business world and requires a very deep understanding of the sugyas. And generally it's something which was relegated to Gedolei HaPoskim, and we try to see what we can learn from what they said to be able to go forward and apply it to our industries, our modern business world. I want to clarify one thing. I know that Heter Mechira has been taking a lot of hits, which is the nature of the thing, but I do want to clarify that the Heter Mechira, when you sell a business, should not be compared to the Heter Mechira of Chametz. The Heter Mechira of Chametz is a lot better. It really is. It's very pashut. The Heter Mechira of Chametz, I know many Rabbanim, they have the same guy They go to year after year and they sell the chametz. I, for some reason, have not been lucky in that respect. The first year, my guy moved away. The second year, he texts me right before Pesach. He's in Antarctica. And every year, I have to sit down with a new guy and explain to them from scratch what we're doing over here. And every year, they start winking at me and they say, okay, I get it. Yeah, you know, your Bible doesn't let you do it, but you want to do it anyway. I get it. And I say, no, you're misunderstanding. We really don't want our chametz. We don't want it. And we're not going to touch it, and we don't care about it. As far as we're concerned, we want you to have it, and you should feel free. I show them in my house where I have my schnapps. Feel free, come and take. And that's really true. We sell our chametz. We don't want to have it. We don't want it. We don't do anything with it. We don't do business with it. We leave it alone. We're fully content with the guy owning it and using it if should he want. He should pay for it, but we're very happy with him having it. But when we sell our business, we want our business to continue to run, and we want to keep on making profit from it. That is the crux of the problem with the heter mechira. And that's kind of like, Target selling their chametz, and they continue doing business with chametz over Pesach. Ramesh has a tshuva about it. But you have to understand, it's a very, very significant difference. When you're selling your chametz, at least from your perspective, you really mean it. You really don't want that chametz. So that's why a heter mechira is a difficult thing. It's a valid halachic it's a valid halachic concept, and it should be done when it needs to be done. But what I want to point out is that I remember my father used to go to the Debreciner Rav and sell his chametz. He would always say, "Hast nicht gekannt austrinken for Pesach." So you couldn't drink up your schnapps before Pesach. You had to really sell it. And the same concept applies to making a mechira of a person's business as well. Obviously, if that has to happen, then do it. But just because you have to do that doesn't mean you have to do that for everything. If there's parts of your business that can be structured in a way that doesn't have a problem, don't sell it. Restructure it. Every year when we have the Archikala, people walk out with much more knowledgeable. And you see the difference. They make changes. Last year when we were learning ribbis, I saw with my own eyes a guy ran out in the middle of the shir, and he called his partner, and he says, "Don't do the deal." We never made a heter iska. And last time when we learned the sugya, the first year of our Yarchi Kala, I was still living in Lakewood at the time, and we had follow-up shiurim in the real estate industry, and they restructured their contracts with a lot of their superintendents and their maintenance guys. And yes, there were situations that required mechira, but there are many situations where you can restructure contracts and etc. in ways that you won't run into Shabbos problems, and that's very important to realize. A heter mechira should be a last resort. Whatever can be done to do a b'ayif and heter should be done. So we're going to cover as follows. We're going to cover in this year, we're going to try to understand the terminology. Number one, it's 5 terms: Oris, Chir Yoim, Kablin, Marasayin, and Kaveh Malachta B'Shabbos. We're going to work through those concepts. We're going to try to understand what's the real problem of a Chir Yoim. Why is he public enemy number 1 when it comes to Hilchos Shabbos? We're going to discuss what about a Chir Yoim who does things on his own schedule, which is a very common situation. Chir Yoim, you pay him per hour, but he works his own hours. And then we're going to get to our sugya, which we'll be learning today, which is Marasayin, how Marasayin relates to the business world we have, different applications, the different cases of the Gemara, and what's the machlokes Rishonim over here between Rabbeinu Tam and the Ri and the Ram. So moving on to the concepts. We've heard already a number of times. We have to chazer it ein many times so that hopefully we'll remember something. Today's sugya, commercial real estate, hiring, having a guy work for you is its own sugya. It's a different sugya than yesterday's sugya of Amir La'akum. Possibly has its own pasuk which answers it. Maybe it's an asmachta. And the concept behind the problem is because adaita di Yisrael. That's the key 2 words that really this whole sugya revolves around. Is it adaita di Yisrael, or is it adaita di nafshe? And we're going to work on this a little later to understand this. But for some reason, when you hire a guy and you're paying him per hour, he's automatically a daita di Yisrael. He's doing it for you. He's not doing it for himself. We're going to try to understand why. We know everybody wants to make some business. Everybody wants to get paid. We're going to talk about that. We'll understand exactly what the chiluk is. But that's the problem that we always have to remember. A daita di Yisrael is the problem. That's what puts us out of business, so to speak, no pun intended, with a schir yoim. He's a daita di Yisrael. Whatever he's doing for you. Whereas a kablan or an aris is doing it, a daita de nafshe is doing it for himself. So that's the problem, and that's what we're going to have to now go and understand. So your common case of a schir yoim, like we've mentioned already, would be like a secretary or anybody that you pay per hour. What's powerful about a schir yoim is that there's a chiyuv mecha. And a chiyuv mecha is an uncomfortable thing. We associate the chiyuv mecha with, people throwing rocks at cars on Shabbos. But a chiyuv mecha is something that you might be obligated to do, and it's uncomfortable. You have an employee, they're paid per hour, we'll talk about, and they say, okay, you know what, I'm going to take this work home on the weekend. I want to finish it up because I want to take off on Monday, whatever their cheshbon is, I want to work on the weekend. And you might have to tell him or her that, no, you're not going to get paid if you do this on the weekend. And that's uncomfortable. But that's a chiyuv mecha. If you know that a schir yom is working for you on Shabbos, there's a chiyuv mecha. If you know that there's an issue of marasayin and you have construction going on and you know they're working on Shabbos, you have to go there and tell the contractor, either you tell your workers to get off the site or you will not be paid. And that's what the Torah obligates us. So that's important to understand. That's what's so powerful about this chiyuv of a schir yom. I was asked an interesting shaila once. There was a yeshiva that was in a community outside of Lakewood. It's no longer there. Was there. And the Rabbeim lived in the community. But that was it. That was about the extent of the Jews. And there were Jews there in the community, but that was the extent of the frum Jews in the community. There was the yeshiva and the Rebbeim. So one of the Rebbeim was in the process of moving there. He lived in Lakewood, and his house was being built and renovated so that he could move into this little community. So he was in Lakewood for Shabbos at home, and one of the other Rebbeim who already lived there comes home after davening Friday night, and he sees that the workers are still working on this guy's house. His chaver is working on his house Friday night, working shalai kedin, marasayin. Does he have a chiyuv mecha? This is zachin la'adam shalai b'fanav. What do you think? Does it make sense? You should go be Michoel on his behalf. Are you obligated to do that? He could tell them they're not going to get paid. He could tell them they were told. He was told. He could say, "I was told by the owner that you won't get paid." You could get them to stop. Very, very uncomfortable thing to do. I agree. You don't even know them. You have no relationship with them. So what? He's not going to help, you're saying. It doesn't pass the chiyuv, you're saying. Okay. The Seder. So let's take this a step further. And now we can concentrate on how difficult it is or how important it is to understand exactly what is a schir yom and what isn't. So let's say you retain a non-Jewish lawyer, right? I know, why would anybody do that? But for some reason, you retain a non-Jewish lawyer, and he bills you per hour, right? If he even thinks about you, he bills you. And he tells you that he's going to work on this over the weekend. So he's billing you per hour. So do you have to now tell, Mr. DiMaggio, please don't work on the weekend for me or I won't pay you? Well, will he even listen to you? Is that וקבלנות or is that schir yom? What do you think he is? You're paying him per hour. He's billing per hour. What is this guy? Huh? Shabbos, Yantiv, yeah. So this is a good example. It's not so pashut. It's not so pashut. It really depends on what kind of agreement you have with the lawyer. Certain lawyers might be a schir yaim. They get paid per hour regardless of what happens, regardless of the outcome. Other times, a lawyer will be a kablan because his getting paid is contingent on him accomplishing a certain task for you. He has to get the contract done or he's not going to get paid. He has to represent you in court or he won't get paid. He doesn't have to win the case, but he has to represent you. So there are situations where a lawyer might be a kablan because it will be based around his job. His payment will be dependent, contingent on the job getting completed, but it's not always like that. Sometimes they're doing work, It's like when you have a company employee, a lawyer that works in a commercial setting, works for a business, and can we get paid per hour? Now, there's another aspect to the question of what we consider a schir yaim when the guy has a yearly salary. How do we look at that? I'm not going to address that. I hope Rabbi Roth will address that. That's advanced discussion of who's a schir yaim and who's a kablan. But it's something to realize. It's not such a clear dividing line. Being paid per hour doesn't necessarily make you into a schir yaim. Sometimes you can be a kablan. Now, a kablan, as we know, is called a daita de nafshe. And it's important to realize that Chazal had a very radical view of a kablan. The lumdus of a kablan in the eyes of Chazal are that the kablan is doing his work and then selling his work to you. That's how Chazal looks at a kablan. When you pay someone for a job, and his payment is contingent on the completed job. So he has a mechanic, right? A classic case. A mechanic, you bring in your car, and he has to change your oil for you, or he has to change your transmission for you. Right? He's charging you $2,000 to change the transmission. So Chazal look at it like this. He does $2,000 of work, he changes the transmission, and then he sells that work to you for $2,000. That's why it's a daita de nafshe. It's almost like he's building a bookcase and selling you the bookcase. That's how Chazal looked at it. It's best, like a quasi case is like when you hire a programmer to write an app. So he's finishing the app and you're paying for the app, provided it works. You're paying for the app. That's how Chazal looked at a kablan. That's why it's a daita de nafshe. And we'll talk a little bit later to understand why it is that a schir yaim is not a daita de nafshe, the daita de Yisrael. So that's a kablan. Kablan is definitely easy to understand. Many forms of employees we have are kablanim. They're paid per job for a set amount. And then the last kind of employee, which we see in our sugya, is an aris. An aris is someone who works on commission, gets a percent, and he gets some chelik of the revenue that he is creating in his work. An aris is a very useful heter. It's a very useful thing to apply, if it can be applied, to utilize in order that your employees should be considered arisim if you give them a certain bonus, if you give them a certain percent, if you can restructure their contract or the way they work on Shabbos so that they should be a aris for Shabbos, many times you will benefit greatly in this sugya because an aris is mutter. An aris is the most lenient form of employee in halacha. Some paiskim, as Rabbi Kushner mentioned before, even allow kaveh malachta. You can even tell them to work on Shabbos according to the Avnei Nezer. And the most common application of arisos nowadays are salesmen who get a commission from each sale, real estate, agents and brokers, all those kind of people who work based on commission-based jobs are all examples of arisim. And again, if it can be applied to a regular employee, it will change the nature of what he is and make it a lot easier to have him work on Shabbos. So step one, anytime you're approaching this sugya, step one is identify the employee. That's step one. Identify the employee. Is he a schir yaim? Is he a kablan? Or is he an aris? Now we move on to step two. Step two is identify the situation. There's two parts of the situation that need to be identified. One is kaveh malachtai, and one is marasayin. Kaveh malachtai means you're requiring him to work on Shabbos. That's a bad thing. That's a bad thing. No matter what kind of employee he is, if you require him to work on Shabbos, that's a problem. That's called kaveh malachtai b'Shabbos. It's its own kind of problem. It has its own heterim, and I won't be going into it too much. Hopefully Rabbi Roth will be dealing with that more. But what's important to understand, is to give you a classic case. You bring in your clothing to the cleaners. The cleaners are working for you now. They're your kablonim. They're washing your clothing for you. They're cleaning your clothing for you. No problem. A kablan, he's doing it on his own property. He's doing his own work. No problem with that. But if you bring it in Friday, right before the Zman, and you tell them, I need it ready, Matzah Shabbos, let's say on these early Shabbosim, right? They're open to 6 o'clock, and you bring it in right before Shabbos, and you tell them, I need it ready, Matzah Shabbos, I'm taking a flight, and they say, no problem. So obviously they're going to have to clean it on Shabbos. You're a kaveh malachta b'yom Shabbos, and that's not allowed. So that's kaveh malachta. Kaveh malachta could always be a problem, and it's very relevant, kaveh malachta. It's very relevant, like what I was saying before. You can hire someone in Pakistan to write a program for you. You can hire him in Pakistan to do graphic design for you, but you give them the job right before Yontiv, and you tell them it has to be ready, Matzah Yontiv. That's not okay. Well, it's got to be malacha. I mean, no, that doesn't make a difference. Now, to get to that, it's also important to understand is that this works in halacha with normal business practice, with business norms. Meaning, let's say you give it to him a job that takes 10, 12 hours to do, and you give him the job Thursday night, late at night, so obviously, yeah, he could work through the night, and then he won't have to work on Shabbos, but that's not considered a business norm. People don't work through the night. So you can't utilize that to say that I'm not a kaveh malachta b'yom Shabbos. I gave him the option of working through the night. That doesn't work. It has to be something which is a normal business practice. One very common application of kaveh malachta that everybody runs into is shipping. If you do overnight shipping and you want to deliver it on Shabbos, that's a kaveh malachta. You do 2-day shipping and it's going to be on Yontiv, on Shabbos, that's a problem of kaveh malachta. You can look in Rabbi Kushner's book. By 2-day shipping, there's a heter there from Rabbi Miller. And one interesting thing to know about kaveh malachta is that it applies even where the person isn't your employee at all. For example, you manufacture something, right? So you have people in China, Alibaba, people are manufacturing things for you. And you give them an order, and you know it takes them 5 days to produce, and you want it to be ready the day after Yontiv. So you give it to them Erev Sukkot, you give them the order, you say, have this ready for delivery right after on Isru Chag. So they're manufacturing it and then they're selling it to you, right? They're not even your employee at all. They're manufacturing something which you buy. You're buying the end product. But being that you're kaveh malachta b'yom Shabbos, that can also possibly have a problem. Again, it needs something that needs to be discussed, but you have to realize kaveh malachta is a very far-reaching problem. Anytime you're going to force a guy to do work for you on Shabbos, even if he's his own guy, you're going to have to refer back to the sugya if it's a problem or not. I'm sorry? Time zones can play a role. Usually works against us. Just tell you this. They're a cloud. Sorry? That will have a Roth domain. Okay. Let's move on to Marasayin. Marasayin is the next thing a person has to identify about the situation. Step 2, identify if there's a problem of Marasayin. Marasayin is a significant problem. And soon we'll get to it and we'll take apart all the Marasayin in our sugya. Sugya has a Merchatz Marasayin, it has a Soda Marasayin, it has a Bias Marasayin, and each one of these have to be understood and understand how we apply it. But when there's a Marasayin problem, it's a problem even by a Kablan. I mean, the Gemara has a problem even if you rented out your whole business, the Gemara has a problem of Marasayin. Marasayin is a very all-inclusive problem. When it's a problem, it's a very big problem. And there are many different applications of Marasayin where Marasayin could be a problem. If you have an agent selling your own home, you have a nice house somewhere. Okay, I presume you live in a Jewish community, you're probably not going to be selling it to a guy, so there's no reason why you should be open on Shabbos. But let's say you have a house somewhere else, not in such a Jewish community, it's a country house, or you live in a community that has many goyim in it, and you have a non-Jewish broker, and he wants to do an open house on Shabbos. So he's an open house in your house, you're not there anymore. Can you do an open house on Shabbos? Is that a Marasayin problem? Sounds like a Marasayin problem to me. It's Darka Barisus, right? What's the malacha? There could be malachas involved. If he sits down and signs something with people, he signs a contract with someone. That's a good point. There's definitely v'daber davar involved. There's v'daber davar. How about another case? Let me give you this case. What do you think about this? This is a very common situation. You have 20 computers, 30 computers in your business. And you don't have an IT department. You contract it out. You have a geek squad that takes care of all your IT needs, right? All your computers need to be updated. It takes a couple hours to get that done, right? So you have this geek squad, and you call them in, and you say, come in and do it. So you don't do it while everybody's working, so you want it done on Sunday. They say, listen, Sunday we have another job. We'd be very happy to do it for you on Saturday. So you're going to have a whole troop of 20 IT guys coming into your business, your office, and updating all your computers on Shabbos. They're doing it totally adapted to nafshay. They're kablanim. They wanted this. They chose the day. You gave them the option of doing it on Sunday. They say, no, we want to do it on Shabbos. Can you do that? Or is that marasayin? You have a troop of people walking into your business and turning on the lights and running all the computers on Shabbos. Does the sign work? It's a very simple solution to marasayin. Chazal were in some of, not everybody sees the sign. You think you could do that? What? Remotely the same thing? Right, so remotely usually is not a marasayin. Remotely is they're not visible. But if they're coming in and doing it, that's there you have a considerable marasayin issue. Interestingly, marasayin really extends beyond that. For example, you have a van, Leiby's Kegel and Pickles, and it needs maintenance, right? So Leiby's Kegel and Pickles van is sitting on the corner. I remember when I lived in Los Angeles, there were two huge body shops on the corner of the shul and the kollel. So you have the Leiby's van being worked on Shabbos, very clearly Jewish-owned van. And the Kablan is doing work. He's 100% the Kablan. But he's doing a work on something which is clearly identifiable as a Jewish item. Now, this is a case discussed in Shulchan Aruch. They talk about when you give your clothing to a guy to wash, and the guy chooses to wash it on Shabbos. But the problem is the clothing is very Jewish clothing. It's a beketcha. Everybody knows it's Jewish clothing, and they're washing Jewish clothing on Shabbos. And it's a machlekes a paiskim if that's okay. Even though everybody knows they're kablanim. But there's marasayin. People think you gave it to them on Shabbos. That interestingly comes up more that sometimes employees take home the van. We have Goyish employees and they take home the van. So they're driving around with Chaim Yankel's plumbing service on Shabbos. Is that okay? So marasayin has a lot of different applications and can make a lot of trouble. What's important to know about marasayin, which we'll talk about, is if marasayin, obviously, if it's chus l'tchum, if there's no Jews around, so then that's a solution for marasayin. That doesn't help on Chol Hamoed. But we're going to have to discuss how exactly we apply tchuma nowadays. And also we're going to talk about when everybody knows what's going on, because the way the industry works today, everybody does our kablanim, so there's no chance of anybody making a mistake. We're going to have to address that as well. So this is what we're going to have to talk about as far as marasayin is concerned. But again, whenever you're approaching a shaila, step 2 is identify the situation. Is this a situation of kaveh malachta b'Shabbos, and is this a situation of marasayin? Now here's another thing, and this is step 3. This wasn't in the Mar Mekaymis. This should be the first you're hearing about. I mean, hopefully you heard about this before. And this is known as the Mahari Abuav. The Mahari Abuav was halfway Rishon, halfway Achron, quoted by the Beis Yosef. And he comes up with a new problem. Very interesting problem. He says there are situations where a kablan can be turned into a schir yom. What's his case? His case is the case of our Merchatz case. You have a bathhouse. Now, the way the employee setup worked over there was that the guy got paid to come and to run the merchatz. However, it depended if there were customers. If there were no customers, then he sat around, did nothing, he played cards. If there were customers, they fired it up, and he heated up the water, and he got it running. So he got his paycheck no matter what. He got his paycheck for coming in. Got his $300 for coming in for that day. That no matter what, he got his $300. If there were customers, he did work. If there's no customers, he was Yeshiv Batel. So the Maria Buav says there's a very serious problem there. Because now it turns out that whatever work he's doing, he's not doing for his own benefit. Even though he's a kabbalan, he's doing it for your benefit. Why? Because he's getting his money no matter what. He gets his money just by showing up. He's already gotten his paycheck. And now when customers come, that's being done solely for your benefit. He's not making any extra money off that. Let's think of it in a modern day application. You have a contract. You have a contract with IT guys, maintenance. You have a contract with them. They get paid a fixed amount every month. So they get paid whatever it is that you pay for your IT service. You pay them $2,000, $3,000 a month. Snow removal service. All the developments or big commercial buildings have snow removal contracts. And you pay them a monthly fee for snow removal. Assuming, again, you don't pay them for individual snow removals, you pay them a monthly fee. So they're getting their money simply by being available. They're going to get their $2,000 no matter what. As long as the month passes, they get that money. If there's something for them to do, they do. If there's nothing for them to do, then they don't. If snow falls, they clear it. If there's an IT problem, then they take care of it. So here, even if they're working remotely, and they're working Bitzina, and your place is in Wichita, Kansas, there's no Marasayan issue. And you have a snow falls, or you have an IT problem, and they want to address the problem. They're not making a dime from the work that they're doing. They already got their $2,000 for the month. They're only working for you. They're only working to benefit you. That's the Maria Buav. They turned into a schir yaim. And you can't let them do the work. That's the Shittas of Maria Buav. So I understand, I just want to make sure you understand clearly. It's a fascinating concept. 100% true, but let's say that's not the situation. Right? When snow falls, they probably in your contract it says when do they have to get rid of it? They have to get rid of it within 24 hours, right? No. You want your business to be open, right? You have a nursing home in wherever, and you want the snow gone, right? So they have to do it on Shabbos. You have service agreements with people, right? You have service agreements with IT. They have to get rid of it. They have to take care of the problem within a certain amount of time. And that time falls out on Shabbos, and it has to get done before the end of Shabbos. Now, just to contrast, to understand, my computer broke last year. It was a matzav of pikuach nefesh. And where I lived, there was no Jewish IT guys. So I went to Best Buy. Bad idea. And they didn't fix my computer, but they charged me for a service agreement, $200, that they'll fix it for the next year whenever I should choose to use their service. And then I gave them my computer to be fixed, right? So at this point, whenever I bring in my computer, they're not making an extra dollar from me. They're not making a single dollar from me. They're just fixing it because of the service agreement. I already paid for the whole year of service, $200. Whatever work they do now, they're doing just for me. So if I give it in right before Shabbos, now, they don't guarantee you anything. You can wait for your computer for 2 weeks. So that's why it's not a problem. But if you were to have that agreement with them, that they have to do it on Shabbos, there's no heter for that. So even though you're giving in your computer, they're working on it in Best Buy, they're doing their thing, you can't do that. Because they are doing the work only for your benefit. It's a Maria Buav. That's the problem of the Maria Buav. So step 3 always is to identify who's making the money here. Who's making money from this work? If the goyim are not making money from this work because they made their money already, you have a Maria Buav problem. Sorry? Yeah, they have to work, obviously. They said that's what they signed. That's why they're getting paid to begin with. But they get their money even if they don't work. That's the point. Whether work, there isn't necessarily going to be work. They definitely have an interest. That's why you could possibly disagree with the Maria Buav. They have benefit from it. But the key to understanding the Meri Abuav is that they got paid simply to show up. They're going to get their paycheck just by providing the service, by being available. That's what makes it a Meri Abuav case. And then whatever work they do is ready for your benefit, according to Meri Abuav. If you are Mechayev them, and a Chanami. But let's say you weren't. Let's say you weren't Mechayev them. So that's... I didn't want to get too involved in that, but yes, that you have to know. I mean, if there is Schir Yom,
Let's say it's a Makam absence, there's no problem, Kabbalah. It's still a problem,
Schir Yom. Funny case just came up. It's interesting whether you can apply this to Meri Abuav. My brother-in-law was coming from Canada, and he got a speeding ticket right over the border. And he had passed a police car that was in the shoulder, and he didn't change lanes. So you give him 6 points, and he has to do a court appearance. He has to show up. He's not interested in showing up. He has to drive 7 hours to show up to have to pay the ticket. So he hired a lawyer to represent him. And the lawyer charged him a flat fee, $300 to represent him. And now the court appearance, that's not actually what happened, because of course he hired a Jewish lawyer. But if he would have hired a non-Jewish lawyer, and the court appearance turns out to be on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Now, the guy could reschedule it, but he doesn't care. He doesn't want to reschedule it. Is that a Meri Abuav case? You're paying him $300 to show up no matter what. But whatever malacha he has to do next is only to benefit you. Do you think that's a Meri Abuav case or not? To understand what's going on over here. Let's think about it for a second. But he is. Right now, he's going to be doing it on Shabbos. That's when the court appearance is. He didn't change the date. He's signing documents. He's signing documents for you as V'daber Davar. Lawyers are not allowed to work on Shabbos. That's a given. Do you understand what the chiluk is? That's why I'm bringing this up. So it's important to understand that you have to be able to divide the two things. You can't always divide the showing up from the work. Sometimes the showing up and the work is hainu hach. Right? He's not saying we pay $300 to show up, but you can sit and do nothing. It's not really separable. That's why this Meri Abuav is really only applicable when you have these kind of service agreements, where by definition, it's like an insurance kind of contract, where they have to service you if you have a problem, but by definition, if there's no problem, they don't do anything. You're paying for the insurance more than you're paying for anything else. That's what's important to understand about the Meri Abuav. You'll only have the Meri Abuav as a problem when that's the nature of the contract you have, that it's more of an insurance kind of contract than anything else.
Or he's available for emergency.
Right. Well, it's the same. In other words, that makes him available. Correct. Could yeah, definitely. Well, certainly. Yeah, that can definitely be a problem. That's why it ends up being a big problem in the real estate industry. I mean, any industry really that employs maintenance companies or IT companies, all these examples. But maintenance is a big deal, you know, in real estate where things break on Shabbos and they have to be tended to on Shabbos. Very hard to structure any kind of contract that won't run into one of these problems. You'll either be a kaveh malachta or you'll be a Meri Abuav. It's very difficult to construct the contract when you're dealing with emergency situations that you shouldn't run into this problem. It could, yeah, if there's money to be made. Like in the case of the snow removal, let's say they would charge you, besides the service contract, they would charge you per snow removal. That's great, right? Then they're making money from each snow removal. That's not a Meri Abuav anymore. So that's a way to get out of that problem. Okay. Those are all cons, you know, that's a possibility. It depends where it is. Fine. So again, there's 3 steps. This is what you have to do. Step 1, you have to identify the employee. Step 2, you have to identify the situation. Is it kaveh malachtai? Is it Is it Marasayin? And step 3, who is really making the money here? Is the guy making money, or is it only you that's benefiting? Those are the 3 steps. Now let's move on and try to understand what exactly is the problem with a Schir Yom. Schir Yom, as we said, he's public enemy number 1. Why? Because he's your shliach, he's a daita de Yisrael. So there's 2 ways to understand this, and the difference between the 2 ways is very important because it makes a very, very big nafkamina. The Pri Megadim asks this question. Pri Megadim says, why would a Schir Yom, guy you're paying per hour, be called a daita de nafshe? He's working for money. It's like everybody else. Why is that called a daita de nafshe? The lashon of the Pri Megadim is, schar malacha matzoihu, lavoid velikach schar. Schar malacha matzoihu. You can always get a job. Lavoid velikach schar. This is what I think he means. He's looking at every Schir Yom, every guy, as like this robot, this working machine. The guy's going to work no matter what. He's going to go to Home Depot and he's going to get himself a job. He's a machine, he's working. That's what he's doing. And you're taking him and paying him to work for you on Shabbos. So the fact that he's working, the fact that he's going to get money for work, that's happening anyway. Someone is going to pay him to work, and that work is going to happen no matter what. You should look at him like a perpetual motion machine. That he's doing that work. Work is going to happen, and he's going to get his money per hour for his work. He's getting his $12 an hour. Either he'll get it in Home Depot working for John, or he's going to get it in Home Depot working for Chaim. So when you take him, and you take this working guy, and you put him to your employ on Shabbos, that's just a daita de Yisrael. Who he works for, why he's working on Shabbos is considered only a daita de Yisrael. The fact that he's working for money, that would have happened anyway. That would happen for anybody. That's the way the Pri Megadim looks at it. We look at the guy like a working machine. You take him. The fact that you're putting him to work on Shabbos is a daita de Yisrael. That's what makes him a daita de Yisrael. Whereas, as I explained before, by a kablan, Chazal look at it like the guy's creating work and selling it to you. So he's never working for you. He's always working for himself. He's creating work. You pay him for the job, for the finished job. You're buying a product from him, except it's not a physical product. It's a work product. That's one way to understand. Another way to understand, which was Rabbi Kushner touched on today, is that, and you see this actually reflected in a number of other places in Halacha, in Schiras Pa'alim, that a Schir Yom is really an Eved. Schir Yom is an Eved. You bought someone and you pay money to him for his time, you bought him. An Eved, you own him forever. And a Schir Yom, you rented him per day. It's a rent and Eved service. That's what it is. You're paying for his time, now his time is yours. And the same way you understand when you have a slave, his time belongs to you and you can tell him to do whatever you want. When you hire a Schir Yom, you pay him the $10 per hour, that hour is now yours. But now whatever he's doing for you. In other words, the money you paid was to buy him. He's not working for the money. You bought him for that money. He sold you an hour of his time for the money. He's your Eved now. And that's most likely why, if there's any tzad in the world that there should be an Isser D'Oraisa, and why the Rav Shulchan Aruch says there's no heter of shvus to shvus, is because it's like Almanya Nuach Avdecha. He belongs to you temporarily. He can't work for you on Shabbos. Once you pay for him, he's yours. Whatever work he's doing for you. Yeah, obviously, So he's a limited Eved. There's a shear in his Avdus. But that's because you didn't buy him the Chol Malacha. And the truth is, it could actually make a difference in Kabbalah, so I don't want to get into that. But Kipshutai, that's the concept. So let's just hear the 2 concepts because there's a very significant nafkamina between them. The first concept is you look at him like a working machine, and the problem is that you took him and made him work on Shabbos. And the other problem is that no, the thing is you bought his time. He's your slave now. His time belongs to you, and whatever you tell him to do, whatever work he does is a daita de Yisrael, is strictly for you. What's the difference? The difference is very pashut. The difference is what about a Schir Yom that you didn't tell to work on Shabbos? A Schir Yom that he's working by his own volition on Shabbos or on week. He calls his own hours. You have a Schir Yom, you have a secretary, you assign her a job on Monday. And she schleps about, she's playing on her computer, she's playing on Facebook or whatever it is that she's playing on, and then Thursday she wakes up and says, oh my gosh, I didn't get the work done. Boss, I'm going to do it on Saturday. I said, look, I gave you the whole week to do the job. You want to do it on Saturday, be my guest. But she's a schir yom, you're paying her per hour. She's choosing her own hours. You're not making her work on Shabbos. You're not you're not specifying hours of Shabbos. So if the whole problem of a schir yom is that you're taking a working machine and making it work on Shabbos, you're not doing that. You're taking a working machine, you say you have a whole week to work. You want to work on Shabbos, that's not a daita d'Yisrael. But if the problem is you bought the time, and now whatever work that gets done is being done solely for you, it doesn't make any difference. There's an hour on Shabbos, you pay $12 for that hour, now you have an eved for that hour, whatever work is done during that hour is going to be a daita d'Yisrael. Even though you know. Knowing doesn't make a difference. Knowing makes it worse, right? It's not going to change it either way.
But if she's on a salary and she's getting the same amount of money either way, isn't that more like a conflict?
A yearly salary, maybe Roth will talk about. Let's keep it simple, right? Not to discuss whether a yearly salary might change things, might not. Let's look at the yearly salary, exactly the same thing. It's just a sum total of 8 hours per day times the amount. This is regular daily. No, so she needs to put on 40 hours a week. So she did 38, and there's 2 hours she still needs to do. She wants to do that on Shabbos. You're buying those 2 hours of Shabbos. She's your eved for 2 hours on Shabbos. If she does work, it's just for you. The time is yours.
I mean, anyway, like if you don't shut her down Erev Shabbos, you have the same issue too.
Same thing. I'm sorry? Why does that make a difference? 100%. I'm talking about someone who decided on their own volition. You did not tell them to work. You just gave them a project. They have to finish it. They want to finish it on Shabbos. They want to take off on Monday. I don't care what their cheshbon is. But they're working for you, schir yom on Shabbos, but they chose to work on Shabbos. That's going to be telling these two stadim. Now, this is a machlokes. The Mishnah Berurah was quoted before. Shaburah's lashon is V'da. This is in Siman Reish Nun Beis, Sifkat in Yotes. Sifkat in Chav Gimel. V'dadem haya eni Yehudi schir yom etzle b'yimei achol. You had an eni Yehudi who was a schir yom during the weekday. But he writes a ata, and he wants now gamkein lasses malachte bebeisa in his own house b'tzina tzarich leilech v'limchas b'yadai kivin shenoi deloi. You have to go and prevent him as soon as you find out. Even though he's not doing it in front of you. So Mishnah Berurah holds it doesn't make a difference if you told him to work on Shabbos. He chose from his own volition. He's a schir yom. He's working on Shabbos. You have to stop him. However, the Shevet HaLevi and the Aruch Shabbos, they say it's mutter, and it's highly surprising that they do not quote the Mishnah Berurah. Very surprising, and they don't. The Rav Shulchan Aruch talks about it. They don't quote that either. Mar Mordechai talks about it. They don't quote that either. But they have a raya. They have a raya from a Sifin Shulchan Aruch that it should be mutter. The Sifin Shulchan Aruch is talking about the ancient postman, where you paid him a fixed amount of money to deliver the letter. That's a kablan. But then the Sif Gimel, Sim Reish Ben Zayin Sif Gimel, it has a case where you pay him per day. However long it takes him to deliver your letter, if he gets stopped by bandits, no matter whatever happens, takes him 10 days, 20 days, you pay him per day. He has a daily salary to continue bringing your letter, to deliver it to its place, and it's mavur that it's mutter for him to work on Shabbos. He chooses, he could not work on Shabbos, he could not travel on Shabbos, up to him. You don't give him a deadline when he has to get there. But if he travels on Shabbos, you pay him, and it's mavur Shulchan Aruch that that's okay. So here you have a schir yom, you're paying this guy per day to deliver your letters working on Shabbos. So they're asking a kasha on the Mishnah Berurah, they don't say they are, but they're asking a kasha on the Mishnah Berurah from an afana mechaber. That's never good. That's never good. So you have to come up with an answer. But everybody can think of an answer on their own. There's different ways to think about this, but I want to bring two rayas from the sugya we learned today. Two possible rayas. Raya number one. The Gemara says that what's the problem? Why is it mutter to have your oris work on your sadeh on Shabbos? Why are you allowed to have your sharecropper who takes a percent? Why is he allowed to work on your field on Shabbos? Because darke barisus. It's darke barisus. The derech is to do it as a sharecropper. Now, what would it be if it's not darke barisus? It would be aser. Why would it be aser? Because people will think he's a schir yom. Do you tell someone who you hire to work your field, do you tell him when to work? Rishonim seem to say you don't. Maria Buav certainly says you don't. Maria Abuev says, yeah, whatever it is, he plows when he plows, and he waters the field when he waters the field, and he chooses to, he just has to get something done by the end of the year. He has to just get it done, and if you pay him per hour, you pay him per hour. But his hours are defined by the work. He doesn't necessarily have to work on Shabbos. It's up to him. So the Schir Yom Kepshuta that the Gemara is talking about is a Schir Yom who calls his own hours, and the Gemara clearly is saying that would be a problem. So maybe it could be Madcha. What do you think? Do you think it's Muchach or not from the Gemara? The Schir Yom was working on a Sada. Maybe. Maybe. Mary Abuev seems to make an assumption that that's the way it works on a Sada.
It's not going Shabbos, it's a full-time job. It's Shabbos, part of what you want to work. Right? Well, not talking about a Schir Yom.
What?
You can't bring a ride with the Gemara and say what would be by a Schir Yom.
We don't know. It's an unknown. Okay. Okay, true. Whereas Schir Yom necessarily won't do that. Okay, so maybe it's not such a raya from the Gemara. Another diak. There's an interesting diak. Taisus seems to say, you didn't see, I don't know if you saw the Taisus, but Taisus has an interesting language. Taisus says, when there's a Maras Ayin issue, he says the Maras Ayin problem is, V'doime kemisha Yisrael mitzavaloi lases b'Shabbos. Taisus seems to say that the problem is we're worried it's going to look like you commanded him on Shabbos to work. Not that you commanded him on Monday to work on Shabbos. You went on Shabbos and told him to work. That's why Taisus says that's the Maras Ayin. And that's funny. Why does Taisus need to say that that's the Maras Ayin? Taisus should just say it's Schir Yom. Maras Ayin is people think he's a Schir Yom. Taisus that doesn't seem to be enough for Taisus. Taisus seems to want that you actually told him to work on Shabbos. That's why it's a problem. And that would make sense if I'm right, that the Schiras Yom that we're talking about is not the kind of Schir Yom that has to work on Shabbos. He has just a, field has to get plowed. Whenever he does it, and he charges you per hour. So that's why Taisus says, no, the problem is people will think you told him to work on Shabbos. So you can look at Taisus, you can see if that's a raya also. This is possible Dukum from our sugya. Lamaisa is a machlekes achronim. Just to call, got Lamaisa over here. Lamaisa is a machlekes achronim. And the Mishnah Berurah says it's aser. The Rav Shulchan Aruch says it's aser. And the Shevet HaLevi, even though he's matter, he doesn't quote the Mishnah Berurah. So that puts us in a difficult situation. It's hard to know. How could he not quote a Mishnah Berurah that says it's aser if he's coming to be matter? The svara is it should remain aser. There's ways to answer up his raya. Obviously, you can't bring a raya from a mefurish or mechaber in the middle of the sugya that the Mishnah Berurah is holding to say neged the Mishnah Berurah. So, b'derech klal, we're not lahachmer on that. So even a Schir Yom that doesn't have special hours is aser. Let's go on to Maras Ayin. So to understand Maras Ayin, we have three cases. First case of the Gemara is merchatz. Second case of the Gemara is sada. Last case of the Gemara is binyan. Lachz mechuber. Merchatz is where you have Leibi's merchatz, Chaim's merchatz, and you rented it out to a guy. That's classic Maras Ayin. The problem is that everybody is assuming that you are the one who's running this merchatz, and they're right for assuming that, because that's typically the way it is. It's not so usual to rent out your merchatz. So you have emblazoned your name on the storefront, and there's a guy working there, and the assumption is if a guy's working there, he's a Schir Yom, because what else would a guy be doing in your merchatz on Shabbos? So that's the Maras Ayin problem. And this is a very classic Maras Ayin, and it's important to understand it's a Maras Ayin where people are making a mistake that's a very justified mistake. And this would apply any time that you have a business and you allow non-Jewish employees to come in. Non-Jewish employees say they want to come in, they want to finish some work on Shabbos. They're kablanim, they're not schirei yom. You didn't make them work on Shabbos. It just works for them. They want to finish off their work. They're in the middle of something they want to finish off. They want to come in to your business, turn on the lights, and work on their computer on Shabbos. They have access. Are you allowed to let them do that? So it depends if there's a Maras Ayin problem. So if your business is nowhere, then fine. But if you're on 2nd Street in Lexington, that's where your office building is, and your non-Jewish employee wants to come in and turn on the lights and run the computer, that's merchatz. That's the case of merchatz. That where for all intents and purposes, people know this is a Jewish business, and now he has a Jewish business running on Shabbos. The second case of the Gemara is Sada. 100%. Yeah. I mean, the base assumption here is that Jews don't run their businesses on Shabbos, unless they have to. But we shut it down, 100%. Second case is Sada. Sada, the Gemara is a case of heter. Why is it heter? Because it's darkoi barisis, which means the typical way of employment on a Sada is something which can be done on Shabbos. An oris, a sharecropper, a guy who gets 1%. What's a classic case of a Sada nowadays? A classic case is a business where the employees almost always get percentages. We talked about real estate agent, brokers, salesmen. So if they're doing work, everybody knows they get paid, they get a commission, they get 1%. There is almost no other structure to that kind of business. It can be very rare again in real estate when you have a leasing office and your leasing agents, again, if that's the norm, they show apartments on Shabbos. They want to show apartments on Shabbos because that's when most of the people come. People are available. So that's darka barisus. That's a case where everybody knows these people get 1%. And therefore it would be mutter. That's sada. The last case is binyan, malachas mechuber, and that's a machlekes rishonim. Malachas mechuber is a case where both possibilities are equally possible. It's normal to do kablanis, it's normal to do schiris, it's normal to do it by ifin heter, but it's just as normal to do it by ifin isser. And that's a machlekes Rabbeinu Tam and the other rishonim. Rabbeinu Tam holds this mutter. Not clear why he holds this mutter, but my hunch is that the reason why he holds this mutter is because he holds that the only time there's a problem of maras ayin is when the people making the mistake are justified for making the mistake. They see a merchitz that has your name on it. People don't usually rent out their merchitz. They're justified for thinking you're hiring a guy to work on Shabbos be'isser. But if you're doing binyan bias, where it's 50% of the people do schiras, 50% of the people do kablanis, they have no right to assume you're doing something be'isser. It's just as possible that you're doing it beheter. They're not entitled to make that mistake. Rabbeinu Tam holds this mutter. Rabbeinu Tam only held as a problem of maras ayin when the mistake is a justified mistake. Tais disagrees, and Tais says, no, as long as it's a normal thing, as long as there's a possibility, people will assume it, and it's usher, and that's the way we paskin. And that's called malachas mechuber. And this is the easiest application to modern day. Every renovation, every building project. You're building a new house, you have to tell them to stop working on Shabbos. You have construction going, you want to do renovations of apartments, you have deadlines. They can't happen on Shabbos. That's malachas mechuber. There's a maras ayin problem. Now, what's interesting is that, again, I don't know that we can pinpoint a place in Shulchan Aruch why it's like that. But again, what I've seen from the way Paiskim treat this sugya is like this. If you have people actually doing physical work to your building on Shabbos, so let's say you have an apartment building, you have any kind of building, and your maintenance guy wants to do maintenance in the basement, he has all his tools in the basement, and all the tenants of that particular building are goyim. So it's within the tchum, it's right next to a Jewish neighborhood. So there's maras ayin here, but he's in the basement, he has the tools in the basement, he's doing work, but he wants to change the plumbing, he wants to change the boiler, he wants a real malachas mechuber. They say it's aser. Maras ayin, malachas mechuber. Once we paskin that it's aser, once we paskin that it's maras ayin, even if it's in a situation where really no one knows, it's the approach of Paiskim that I've seen is like plug. We do not allow maras ayin, we do not allow malachas mechuber on Shabbos. There's a maras ayin problem. However, where the maras ayin is much more of a practical maras ayin. It's not malachas mechuber. Like, for example, someone coming into your office and doing work, working on a computer. It's not malachas mechuber. They're not building, they're not painting, they're not doing something to the building. They're just working on your premises. So over there, the Paiskim are much more willing to say that, okay, it depends. The building is a nondescript building. The business name is ABC, life insurance. It's not a very Jewish name. So as long as there's no obvious way for anybody to think that this is a Jewish business, there's no practical maras ayin, they're much more willing to be mekel. So when it comes to this malachas mechuber problem, so their approach is that if they're actually doing malachas mechuber, they're actually doing work, renovation, building, painting, plumbing, electrical work, as long as it fits maras ayin, it's in a Jewish neighborhood, you can't do it. Whereas if it's just a practical kind of maras ayin, it looks like people are working for you on Shabbos, so that as long as that can be worked out, it's not so nicker, no one will think, no one will see, that will be allowed. So we come out as follows. So the case I gave before, if you have a geek squad that comes to do all your IT work, to work on all your computers, right? So if your building is in a place, it's not in 2nd and Lexington, in the middle of Lakewood, it's somewhere in the middle of Manhattan, it's a nondescript office building, the name of your business is nondescript, no one knows that it's Jewish or not, there's nothing to think that it's Jewish, and there's many other goyim working in the building too. There's 20 other offices in the building, and there's all goyim working all over the place. So you can have your geek squad come in, and they can do the work on Shabbos, because there's no practical marasayin, and it's not melech's mechuber. They're working on a computer. But let's say you have a different kind of service contract. You have people coming and they're switching all the light bulbs in your company. That, Paiskim will be machmer on, because that's melachas mechuber. That's the approach I've seen. Last thing I want to mention, we'll finish with this, is how exactly do we figure out tchumen nowadays? Tchumen is a complicated topic, and you can have, like I was recently discussing this with someone, you can have a business that's, it's within the tchum, it's connected by streets, but it's 20 miles from the nearest shul. No Jew is coming to see your business on Shabbos. It's not happening. But it's within it's tchum, it's all one big city, right? No from Jews coming to see your business on Shabbos. So there are poskim who are willing to be makel on that. They say it's not a strict tchumim halacha. It's not, you don't have to turn to Simon Shin Tzadi Dalet to figure this one out. It's more practically speaking, if it's out of the tchum of practical getting to there on Shabbos, they're willing to be mekel, and that's a very important kula. If your local paisik is willing to utilize that kula. So let's just summarize what we've spoken about. We've covered, first of all, how to identify the problem. That's step 1, identify the employee, if it's a schir yom, if it's an aris, if it's a kabbalan. Step 2 is identify the situation, is it marasayin, is it kaveh malachta b'Shabbos. Step 3 is the bari abua, figure out who's really making money over here. Is the guy making money? Does he benefit anything from the work? Is it only you? Then we identify what exactly is the problem of a schir yom. Why is a schir yom a problem? And we presented 2 ways to look at it, either like it's an avdus, you bought his time, now he works for you no matter what, or it's because he's a working machine and you just put him to your hour, and the nafkamina was, if you don't give him a particular time to work, and he just chooses to work on Shabbos of his own volition, which ended up being a machlekes between the Shevet HaLevi, Aruch HaShabbos, and the Mishnah Berurah, and the Rav Shulchan Aruch, which we're likely machmir on. And lastly, we discussed the sugya of marasayin, where there's 3 cases. There's merchatz, there's sada, which is darka barisis, and there's bayis, which is melachas mechuber. And we clarified that melachas mechuber is something which we're kind of always machmer on, whereas if it's just a practical marasayin, as long as there's no practical marasayin, we'll be mekel. Shkayach.